Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Easter Ross Area Committee, which is taking place remotely on Microsoft Teams. It's the 30th of October 2023 and just after 10:30 a.m. The recording notice is this meeting will be recorded and uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel. You're invited to attend the meeting, and the order of business. The first item on the order of business is apologies for absence. Fiona, do we have any of those today?
Chair, I have no apologies, and shall I just do a quick roll call?
That would be good.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Collier.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Chair, you're here down at Loudon. Councillor Munro.
Present, yep, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rind.
Here.
Councillor Ross.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith.
Here.
Thank you. That's everybody.
It's great. We've got a full complement today. So welcome to Marine to this meeting of the Easter Ross Area Committee. It's another new experience for you.
Thank you. They keep coming.
Right. Item 3 on the agenda is the police area performance report. As I've got that one, can I see the other one? Who have we got today? Stephen, are you here to talk to the police report?
Yes, good morning. My name's Stephen Mezzos. I'm the area inspector based up in Wick and Thurso. I'm covering today on behalf of Inspector Phoebe McDade and Chief Inspector Stuart Fitzpatrick, both being new to the management team for the North Highlands. Inspector Phoebe McDade started in August there as the inspector covering the Easter Ross and Sutherland areas, and Chief Inspector Fitzpatrick covering the whole of North Highland, taking up post in July there. So I've got the scrutiny report here in front of me, the local policing plan. Just want to check that you've received a copy of that.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So I wouldn't intend to read it all out to you. Hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at it before today, or as I go through some of the highlights, or maybe you can ask questions at the end before I disappear off. And if there's any questions thereafter, and we'll have no issues with anyone raising these with us after the meeting concludes either, whether it be today, tomorrow, or next week. So this performance report, it's covering the dates from April 22 to March 23. So it's last year's financial year. And I think the biggest notable challenge for that particular year was that was us now well back into the way of business as usual after the challenges of COVID. But also then we started to realise some real cost of living challenges that started to affect the communities, including those who hadn't felt such hardship before. Our priority has always been to work with our partners to help protect the vulnerable people in the communities and those who are being impacted by these cost of living challenges. There are 6 local policing priorities. First one being the road safety and road crime, and our action there is to collaborate to reduce casualties and crime on our roads. Second priority was antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder, and to tackle that we're looking to engage with the public and the communities and to reduce and prevent that crime. Third priority was acquisitive crime. We were looking to reduce crime through preventing offending and reducing reoffending. Fourth priority was protecting the vulnerable people, and that was through supporting people considered vulnerable through working with our partners. The fifth one was serious and organised crime, and that was to reduce the harm caused by serious organised crime, including cyber-related crime. And any reference in this report today with regards to serious organised crime will be limited only to the supply of drugs in the area. And the sixth priority was terrorism and public order. And that was to prevent, pursue, protect and prepare through collaborative preparedness. And again, for any updates for that, I will not be reporting back on that priority. There are some entries in the report by our counter-terrorist colleagues, and they can provide further updates as and when required. But in this performance report, it doesn't take into account that priority. Let's go through the priorities individually then. For East Ross at a glance, we had road safety and road crime. So the picture's quite positive here. So overall, road crime offences, they've decreased against the 5-year average. However, we're seeing an increase in the last year to date. So we're seeing a trend that the 5-year average road crime is going down, but by us having an increased presence on the roads that last financial year, it shows we're out there being out there more proactive, targeting road safety and actively finding people who are committing offences and prosecuting them or giving them fixed penalties. We've seen again, over the 5-year average, we've seen a decrease in mobile phone offences. Quite a small decrease, 4.4%. But in this last year, again, because we've had lots of officers out on the roads trying to make the roads safer, and we've detected 11 more offences. That's a 550% increase in the last year. And with regards to vehicles and people driving with no insurance, we've seen an increase for the last 5 years and another increase in the last year. And again, that's just indicative that we are out there. I think road safety, road traffic offences are never. It's not something we can completely eradicate, but by being out there and finding the offences in the first place, that sends a message out to the public, and we're seeing the work there by the increase of offences that we're finding on the roads network, and we're only going to find that by being out there. Moving on to antisocial behaviour. So in the last 5 years, we're seeing a decrease in antisocial behaviour that's been reported to us by almost 25% there. And in the last year, again, it's still been a decrease by 9%. That's quite a positive indication for us that people are behaving. The public aren't feeling necessary to phone the police to report people's behaviour. And we have a number of different initiatives that we use to try and kind of combat antisocial behaviour through police enforcement and through working with the Highland Council for nuisance neighbours. But it's quite pleasing to see a good decrease there. So for the assaults, we've got a decrease over the last 5 years for a common assault in the area. There's been 15.4 fewer crimes of assault reported to us. But in this that's over the last 5 years. But in the last year, we've seen an increase by 21 crimes in that 12 months. And we feel this is down to, bear in mind, this was last year's financial year. With the pubs have started to come up again, people getting out into the pubs, people seeing each other again after the COVID situation. So we believe that although it's a decrease of 5 years, this last 12 months has been because of people being back to normal after COVID and their behaviour starting to kind of settle back to how it was before COVID happened. So it would be interesting to see what the figures for this year are when we report back next year to see if they're comparative. On a plus note, the serious assaults, where there's been serious injury to people from assaults, they've been decreasing by 50% in the last 5 years. And again, in this last year to date, they've decreased by 45% on a year-on-year basis. So the significance of the injuries being caused by these assaults are not as impactful as they have been previously, and they keep coming down. Acquisitive crime is the next priority. So this one's a bit of this one's a bit of a concern nationwide. The national trend, we seem to see that acquisitive crime is on the increase, and we're quite certain that the cost of living challenges has a lot to play here. In total, acquisitive crime has increased over the last 5 years by 19.5%, and they've increased in this last year from the year before by 46%. We've had 92 more crimes. If we look at some of these acquisitive crime types, specifically household, I think shoplifting is probably the crime that is causing the biggest numbers in that acquisitive crime. We've seen a marked increase in the number of reports to us from supermarkets and shops from people who are going in and stealing, and we tend to find alcohol seems to be the product of choice. If we look at separate types of crime, we've got housebreaking, specifically house break-ins of dwelling houses. They've increased over the last 5 years by 53%. But if we look at this last year to date, we've gone up by 166%. So that's 10 more crimes in that 12 months. It's quite concerning that people's houses are still getting broken into, and that we are seeing an increase. But we're working with our CID colleagues to identify who these perpetrators are and try and prevent them from continuing that trend. Fraud offences, again, this is a national trend. Fraud is going up all over the country. In the last 5-year average, it's gone up by 63%. In the last 12 months, it's been 52% from the year before. Quite significant increases, and this is people operating in the cyberspace, in the cyber world. It's the online scams, the telephone scams that people are falling for, and we're finding that most of these are all originating from overseas. As far as work that goes towards trying to improve that, I don't have that information to hand, but we've got this action fraud. We've got the National Intelligence Fraud Bureau. They're all looking at these, trying to find different methods to stop people from becoming victims of such scams. Moving on to protecting vulnerable people, then that's priority number 4. Although there's been increases in the crimes that have been reported to us, we're quite positive about this. So for overall, sexual crime has increased by 12.9% over the last 5-year average, and again, it's been increased by 4.5% for the last sort of year to date. Now we're quite encouraged by this because this shows that people are still willing to come forward and report these crime types to us, and have the confidence that we're going to investigate them. Domestic offences, again, there's been an increase in the last 5 years and an increase in the last year to date. I'll be more cautious with the numbers here. The increase doesn't necessarily mean more victims. The increase would generally mean for more types of crimes that we're actually recording. The approach to domestic abuse is we'll take a victim and we'll look at the relationship history, and if we can evidence crimes from throughout their relationship history, no matter how many years ago it was, we will look back and investigate it, and the amount of charges that we libel could be dependent on how many of we can actually prove and have corroboration for. So although there's an increase in crimes, that wouldn't necessarily mean there's an increase in victims. It's the approach that we take to domestic abuse means we're looking further back now. In fact, going back to sexual crime, again, some of these crimes, although we're showing increases, the figures, because of the length of time it might take to investigate some of these sexual crimes, because some of them are very, very complex, and because we're trying to find, because the crime types, it'll be one victim on one suspect. We try to find, we proactively look to see if there's any previous victims from the same suspect that might have happened 2 or 3 years ago, and then if we detect them, these crimes then get added to this year's stats. So I think having the increase in this shows that that this proactive approach, it's working. We're finding more crimes and more people are coming forward to report them to us. Looking at hate crime then, so it shows there's been an increase in 5-year average and an increase of 14.3% against the last year to date. However, that 14.3% equates to 1 extra crime. So I think in the bigger picture, if you look at the numbers that are involved, we've got a very, very small number of crimes that are hate crimes in Easter Ross, where only 1 crime equates to 14% of a 14% increase. So I wouldn't necessarily think that we've got an issue with an increase in hate crime. Okay, move on to the 5th priority, serious and organised crime. So again, this rates we only report back on the drug supply offences. So in the last 5-year average, there's been a decrease. However, in the last year to date, we've seen an increase by 33.3%. And again, this would be us getting back to our normal business as usual policing after the COVID challenges, where proactivity had to be quite minimal. To now be in a place where we can get back up to being as proactive as we want to be, trying to build the confidence of officers who maybe started during the COVID times, and we're starting to see an increase in the number of drugs offences that we are detecting. And lastly, after the priorities, we've got the counter-terrorism and domestic extremism. So again, it's not one that we report back on in this report, but there is a paragraph there from the counter-terrorist officer, just to sort of highlight some of the things that we do for counter-terrorism and intelligence gathering and people that we work with. I want to go through the next few pages, taking sort of the priorities, just a bit more sort of glance and view of the sort of the numbers involved. Going back to road safety and road crime. We're seeing here that we've got a variation of -1. If you look at the number of fatalities, I think they're still quite low. Every fatality, of course, is an absolute tragic event. But for the number of traffic collisions that we go to, I'll say that the percentage of those that are fatal are fairly low. We've got 1 less fatal traffic collision this year compared to the previous year. Our drunk driving offences is one that we're looking at. We're quite, it's still concerning that the number of people that still want to go out there and drive under the influence of drink or drugs. Drug driving is a relatively new offence, but we're still out there pulling cars over, and we've seen an increase of 24 crimes for drink or drug driving compared to the previous year. And it's one that we're still this year, we're going to carry on working towards as well, and you'll see regular updates about how many offences we're catching. Speeding, that's a bit of an unusual one. I wouldn't expect to see the reduction in the speeding offences being detected. We've detected 72 crimes less this year compared to the previous year. And yeah, I can't offer an explanation for that one. We certainly are out there policing the North Coast 500. Our road policing officers have campaigns to try and tackle that. But yeah, there's been a reduction in the amount of speeding offences detected. Not entirely sure if that's an accurate reflection of what's going on, or whether it's just that the police haven't been out there as much as they were the year before. But we'll certainly look into that to see if we can compare what's going on there. Most of our work under road safety and road crime comes through Operation Cedar. So this is like an ongoing campaign. It's been ongoing for many years, where we challenge, educate, detect and reduce sort of road traffic offences, road traffic injuries, fatalities. And just by being out there proactively, working with divisional officers, road policing officers, being out on the routes that are being used by the public, where there's report of concerns for driving behaviour. It's trying to target them areas and influence driver behaviour overall. Moving back onto antisocial behaviour again. you're probably aware there has been a murder incident this financial year, but this report reports back to the last year's financial year, where there's been no murders for the last 5 years. We'd expect to see the one that happened in May in next year's report. But overall, the numbers seem to be sort of relatively stable there. The increases, again, we suggest that's because the public are getting back to learning to interact with each other in social settings or in private dwellings. And we're starting to see the increase from last year to this year, and people being assaulted. We've got the introduction of a harm prevention officer now based down in Inverness, and they look through these incident types, and they identify people who are vulnerable through vulnerable victims or vulnerable suspects, through mental health, alcohol and controlled substances. Seeing a trend of cuckooing at the moment. This relates to drugs supply kind of activity, but they tend to target vulnerable people. And again, some of this violent crime comes through the act of cuckooing. So this harm prevention officer, they have regular liaison with our partner agencies to identify people who are vulnerable through alcohol, through drugs, who may be targeted for cuckooing, the children who may be getting used for county lines offences, and they're putting in intervention measures. They identify them early, try and get support out there ASAP, to stop victims being so easy to victimise, and to perhaps the ones and the suspects or the perpetrators who are vulnerable through drugs and alcohol. It's trying to put support in place to help them cope better with trying to reduce the alcohol and drugs consumption, hopefully try and stop them from behaving in such a way towards other people. That's, again, that only came in November 2020, so hopefully next year we'll start to see the benefits of having that harm prevention officer and the work that they do. Move on to the next page for acquisitive crime. Like I said, it's been an increase in all these crime types, and we're quite sure this is down to the cost of living crisis on the go just now. Shoplifting's probably a big concern at the moment. You may have seen recent news articles saying that there's not investigating shopliftings. That's not the case in East Ross or the Highlands. We still investigate shopliftings. We will still pursue CCTV. We'll still pursue the suspects, and we'll still try and charge them. So in that respect, we've not stopped doing that. Sometimes the time it takes might be a bit longer than what we're used to, just through the budget challenges that we've got in the police. But ultimately, we still investigate these crime types. We've not stopped investigating them crime types. For the frauds, the banking protocol is still working. The banks will often identify vulnerable people who are trying to make transactions that seem to be quite spurious or quite indicative of someone being a victim of fraud, and they will highlight that to the police, and the police will come along, speak to the victim, assess what's going on. And there has been a number of instances where we are preventing someone from losing substantial sums of money because we've been able to help them recognise that what they're getting involved in is a scam. However, we still do find people that are adamant that what's going on is not a scam, and they will still follow through with providing that money to the people that are asking for it. But overall, I think that banking protocol is making a big difference there. Going to move on to protecting vulnerable people now, looking at the numbers there. So again, the variations, the increases, they're not big increases. The domestic crime, like I said, would be more a case of, I wouldn't say that's more victims. I would say that's we're detecting more charges for the same victim and the same perpetrator in a relationship. And the sexual crime, again, the detection rates are very good. We're quite happy to set detection rates for them. They're quite hard crimes to detect because of the one-on-one nature. But like I said, we're starting to go back to previous relationships with the same suspects to see if we can corroborate the behaviour in a previous relationship with the behaviour of the current relationship, and we often find some good success in getting convictions through that method of gathering evidence. But notably, we're seeing missing persons have gone down by 8 people, and we're seeing a reduction in the number of missing children from care settings. I think that's due to we've got liaison officers now for these care settings who work closely with the staff and the youth and the police, and we're noticing a reduction of time spent having to search for these children while they're outstanding in the communities. And I think that's it from me for the report here. Serious and organised crime.
Thanks.
Sorry. So, like I said, we only report back on drug supply offences, and we're just like I said, we've only got one more detection for drug supply offence for the last year, but you'll see there's an increase over the last 5 years, and we've got a high detection rate of 75% for them, and that's as we're going back to our proactive ways of policing them. And that's for the rest of the stats there. That's all there for everyone to see. And if anyone's got any questions about that, I'm more than happy to take them.
Okay, Stephen, thanks. That was an excellent and a very comprehensive report. I'm seeing 1 or 2 members' hands up already. So first on my screen is Pauline Munro.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Stephen. Yes, delighted with the report. Thank you very much. Good to know all these things. This isn't really actually about today's report. It's really about what's ongoing right now. We're having a huge issue in our local area. Down at the West End, we've had armed police there, we've had police there, we've had lots going on. I now have children that are scared to go to school because they're having panic attacks on the way to school because they're scared of what's been happening. We've had a machete attack, a knife attack. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. So I keep getting emails from people saying, what can be done? I don't know the answers. I keep telling them to go to the police because we're not the police, obviously. But I mean, is there anything that we can give them some sort of reassurance that it is? We are trying our best because everyone's aware of the murder that's already happened. And all I hear now is, well, the next one's just around the corner because these boys from Liverpool are coming up every 3 days and delivering crack and all sorts of things. I don't know how true all of this is. I just keep getting sent it, Stephen. So I don't know what's true and what's not true, but we certainly are having a major issue in specifically the West End at the moment with drugs getting in, so much of it. But I'm sure you'll be able to answer me. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, so we're talking about the incident from last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had the machete last week, and then we had the stabbing, and yeah, there's been attacks and all sorts of things that I've been sent pictures of, and I mean, it's lovely, but yeah, I keep saying to people, send it to the police, don't send it to me, send it to the police.
Pauline, you'd have to say that those are allegations at this stage.
Yes, sorry,
So we
yeah, absolutely.
We have to be careful.
Sorry, Derek, you're right.
If
yeah,
they're
sorry.
already sub judice.
Well, absolutely, you're correct, Derek. Sorry, I didn't mean it that way. I think I'm just a bit concerned about everything right now, and I want to give them reassurance, but I don't know how to.
Okay, so well, I can't comment on incidents themselves on this forum. What I would suggest is that we are aware of incidents and linked incidents ongoing to that area, and there's currently investigations ongoing. Still lots of police activity happening in regards to that investigation. But yes, I would suggest the community have been reporting matters to yourself, and there's probably things that we are not aware of because it's not been reported to us. But I would always strongly recommend that report them to the police or use Crime Stoppers if they want to keep it anonymous, so that information does come to us and we'll assess it and act on it.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Molly, I think you're next.
Thanks, Derek. Just a very quick one, and I'm sorry I look so ghostly. I don't quite know what's going on with my lighting. But Stephen, thank you for your report. Just a quick one. There was a big increase in drink and drug driving in Easter Ross and a decrease in Caithness and Sutherland. And likewise in domestic crime, a decrease in Caithness and Sutherland, but a big uptick in Easter Ross. And I'm just wondering if that's of any concern and if there's any specific reasons why it might be going in a different direction to the rest of the far north.
No, I would think that it's detecting these types of crime types. It's resource dependent. They tend to be. We wouldn't get many that would be reports from members of the public. Most of these detections would come from officers patrolling and stopping cars. We do get members of the public do phone us, and we will allocate resources to it to act on it, but it's resource dependent, and depending on where the resources are being tasked or directed in the specific areas, would really, that's how your figures would kind of equate. So in Easter Ross, there's been a big push, and there's, because they're quite close to road policing units, then I would say these detections are they're more readily kind of available for the officers to find. Up in the far north, again, it's just trying to get the resources out there in the first place is a bit of a challenge, but it's still, I would say that it's a comparable picture. It's just whether we're in a position to be able to act on it or not is a different question.
Thank you.
Okay, and next is Maxine.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Stephen. I don't have any questions. Mine's kind of more of a good news story. I just want to point out the main thing that's been happening in Gordon is like minor vandalism. But I have to say we had an issue in the Tower Garden a few weeks ago. I emailed Kay McRae, but she's moved on now, but she kindly passed on my email to a Phoebe McDade, and I have to say, Phoebe was fantastic. I needed her to look at the CCTV to see who'd vandalised the garden, because we now have an extension down there, and she did that within the day, and I really wasn't expecting that. I thought I'd have to wait several days, but she was so kind. So I just want to say thank you to Phoebe for that. That was great.
Thank you, Rich. I'll pass that on to her.
Thanks, Maxine. Good news is always welcome. Next up is our new councillor, Stephen, Maureen Ross.
Oh, okay, Stephen. I just have a query. I'm not really understanding why it's the issues regarding cars and trucks and vehicles that are just parked up. They've got no MOT, no road tax, and they're taking up all the spaces. They're not going to move at all. We've 2 or 3 areas in the ward. We've got Milton, we've got Mansfield and Tain, and we've got the Seaward villages. And it really is quite an issue. And when I went to the Highland Council, I went to the antisocial behaviour chat. I've been told, oh, it's housing or it's roads. Then I've been told, no, it's the police you have to speak to. It's DVLA. It's almost like this issue gets battered about everywhere. And I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can have joined up thinking on this and try and get some of these issues sorted out? Because it is really upsetting for residents who have outside their house something like 6 to 8 cars. None of them belong to them, and half of them don't even have wheels on them. So is there a policy with the police how you go about these issues?
Yeah, what I'd suggest, I'm not overly familiar with the issue you're talking about, so maybe I can perhaps give you a call after this meeting, or you can call me and we can talk about it further.
That would be great. Thanks very much, Stephen.
Yeah, I think that's one, Stephen, where there has been success in the past when the council and the police have worked together. I think the council have to put notices on the vehicles, but then they can be removed thereafter if they don't move. Alistair, maybe you're an old hand at this. Maybe you could help me out there if I'm talking rubbish.
No, you're not talking. That very successfully happened on 2 occasions, I think, in Road and Tain and in Mansfield Estate, where there was a joint operation with the police, the DVLA, and the council themselves, and a lot of vehicles were removed. And I think what Maureen talks about, especially down in the Ballantor area, and again in Mansfield, and well, I drive round Fountain Road quite often, and you know, a lot of vehicles here. So I think we need a joint up approach again with all agencies to try and tackle this problem.
Okay, and Helen, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I'm very happy to pick up and make contact with officers on the council side, and we can have a discussion with Stephen and get some more details from Councillor Ross.
That would be really helpful. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. And Maureen, thanks for the question as well.
Can I just confirm that Councillor Ross has received? I've just sent her a message on Teams with my email address and phone number, just to confirm that she's received that.
That's great.
No problem.
Helen? Yep. No, Maureen, have you got that on in the chat?
I will put my email address and contact number in the chat. Okay.
Okay, that's good. I think that way both sides know what the other one's doing. That'll be great. And if you work through Helen, that would be great as well. Okay, right. Next up, get back to my agenda. Thank you, Stephen. I'm not seeing any more hands up at the moment. So, oh, Helen, is that a legacy hand, Helen? Or is it? Yeah. Okay. Right.
I thought I'd taken it down.
So thank you very much for coming along, Stephen, and for giving us a very full rundown and for answering all the questions we had. And I've no doubt we'll encounter you again at a meeting in the future, and I hope your first experience of us wasn't too bad that you know you have any difficulty in coming back. We're always very grateful for you taking time out of what we know is a very busy schedule to come along. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but I suspect you're probably going to be busy and we'll have to depart. So thank you very much for attending today.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you. Yep, I will take that offer and I will depart. Thanks very much for being so friendly and accommodating for me. And yeah, it wasn't an unpleasant experience.
That's all right then. We'll see you again.
Thank you. Bye now.
Okay, bye. Right, back to my agenda. Okay, so next item on the agenda is item 4, which is housing revenue account capital program. We have a I think officers online. Mark Rogers I've certainly seen, and I don't know if it's
I think we have Rory McLeod.
Rory. Yep. I'm scrolling down my my list of names, but yep, I'm seeing Rory there as well. So Rory, if it's you that's presenting, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. You'll have the Easter Ross Housing Revenue Account Capital Program update before you. I won't read it out in detail. I'll go through a couple of highlights. Members are asked to note the summary update of the program, which is contained in section 5 of the report, and to note the capital resources that are identified for Easter Ross in at section 6.7 of the report. Agree to the proposed investment priorities in the program for Easter Ross for the 2003-2027 period, which is set out in Appendix 1, and to note that we'll be continuing to provide updates through ward business to local members for each of the wards in Easter Ross. I will go through the program principles and then some key challenges and open up to questions to members. The program, as outlined, is following the guiding principles that we will replace major components through managing the life cycle of the components, targeting oldest first. So that's things like kitchens and bathrooms for component replacement. There'll be a program of heating and energy efficiency works aiming to achieve compliance with the Scottish Government's energy efficiency standard for social housing, or EISH. Members will note that EISH 2 is due to be updated this year by the Scottish Government, and we're looking forward to seeing the updated guidance coming out for that. There'll be an allowance for structural work to roofs, chimneys and external fabric of houses. There'll be an allowance for environmental works, which is a member-led budget, and we'll be continuing to seek guidance from members on the environmental work spend. There will be also funding for equipment, aids and adaptations to improve the independence within the home for people with disabilities and the elderly. There's a couple of key challenges that we've encountered. Obviously, there's been ongoing effects of slowing down works through COVID, and we're looking to see how we can, we're continuing to work to accelerate works that may have been slowed down through the COVID period. There's also the building inflation, which has affected materials and labour in the construction industry, and we'll be carrying out, or we are carrying out, a capital plan affordability review. So a revised capital plan is likely to be returned to the Housing and Property Committee in the next financial year. And the other issue has been contractor capacity, and when we're seeking tenders from contractors, and we're monitoring the situation across Highland. This is it's a Scotland-wide issue, but we're monitoring the situation in Highland, and we are noting that in some areas that it has been difficult to get returns on tenders, or as many returns on tenders as we would like. Members will note that the Q1 outturns for Highland-wide were reported to the Housing and Property Committee in August. So having outlined some of the challenges and the program principles, I'll open up to any questions that members may have.
Thanks, Rory. I'm seeing there's a couple of hands up already. One of the things I've kind of picked up on in the report is, it gives the sums, but I think it would also be rather useful to see how many homes that would actually relate to. Especially in the sort of things like climate change adaptation. Is it going to take us 10 years or 100 years to meet our obligations there with that level of spend? Now, you may think that's a kind of daft thing to ask for, because what we're asking for is for you to provide evidence that we're not doing things very quickly. But basically, if we're trying to push higher organisations to provide us with more funding, that I think would be useful information for us to be able to present. So if it is going to take us 100 years to meet our obligations, then we need to say, we need to recognise that, and we need to to lobby to make sure that more money appears so that those things can happen more quickly. So with that exception, I'm seeing there's lots of hands up, and the first of those hands was Maxine Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for saying that, Derek. Although it's a bit gloom and doom, but part of it is, unfortunately, excuse me, unlike housing associations, we haven't actually, factored in the financials for every 10 or 20 years, replacing things in houses. So I have a few general sort of things I want to mention, but also a couple of questions. In previous years, Rory, when Jim and others used to do, we used to have the reports broken up a little bit more, so that we could see which estates we're talking about. You know, I don't necessarily need to know the street, but with the report you've given, we don't know even which ward it's in. And I think we'd like to know which estate it's in. You know, is it in sort of West End, South Lodge, Milnerford, whatever? I would like an indication on that for all of the areas. Second, you talked about Ish, which I'm very familiar with. So how are we getting on with Ish? And Ish 2's coming soon. And are we replacing the, ancient antique heating systems that were, I forgot what it's called, the Economy 7 thing, Economy 8. Are we replacing those with storage heaters? Are we replacing those without air source heat pumps? Or what are we replacing them with? Is it going to be gas or electric? Because really, I think, the Scottish Government were giving grants for air source heat pumps. Are they still giving grants? Also, what about solar? Are we planning to put any solar panels on any roofs? The Scottish Government were giving out grants for that too, although that might have come to an end. So a lot of questions there, but finally, can I end up with the bit where you've given the environmental projects near the end? Sorry, I haven't got it up on my screen. Let me bring it up. Yeah. Environmental improvements towards 6 and Ward 7, and you've put amounts, and you've put member-led budget, priority environmental capital projects identified through engagement with the local team. Now, it usually is a member-led budget, but I don't remember being asked what my priorities were. Usually we get asked and then you go back to the local team and we work together to see what we actually want to identify. Like in the past, we've identified car parks before. Not that I'm saying we do that now, but we might have something. And I don't have a particular thing in my head, but maybe my colleagues do. And just one other final thing I've just remembered. I know some people that I've purchased their houses in Milnerford in the past, and they've just been having to get their roofs tackled. And I know you've put roofs in there, but the houses in Milnerford were, prefabs, as you know, and they're over 60 years old. And many of them, the roofs are really less than, the way they should be. I'm losing my words today. And also the outsides are pretty bad. So I wonder where we are with Milnerford and what can be done with those houses. And, we've also got ones in Invergordon that are quite old too, but we don't have prefabs. And the prefabs are a big issue because their lifespan must be coming to an end unless we do something with them. And we're not building quick enough to rehouse all those people. Sorry about all the questions. Thank you.
Okay, Rory, are you happy for me just to continue, and you'll end up with quite a long list? And Mark, I'm seeing you got your hand up and you want to come in, maybe.
That's fine, Councillor Loudon. I'll do my best to answer everyone's question at once, but if anyone needs to come back, if I miss anyone, I'd appreciate them doing that.
Yeah, they'll certainly have the opportunity to do that, Rory. Thanks. Mark, do you want to come in at this point?
I'll just make a couple of quick observations if I can, because some of what you and Maxine were saying, Derek, actually my comments would apply to both of those, and might help to give some context. So we talked about climate change obligations you did and the timeline for that. I suppose it's an opportunity cost debate. So one of the other things, and Maxine just mentioned it in her comments there just now, was about the pace at which we build out new housing. Okay, but the challenge is the investment amount required, estimated at the present time, to bring stock not just up to ISH, but also SHQS standards, and to maintain it there, which is the important part, 'cause it's not just a one-off spend, it's a continuing requirement, is actually very substantial. So these amounts will vary as the survey data becomes more robust and is completed, but at the minute we're talking about £250 million worth of investment in our existing stock. Now, the opportunity cost element comes from how quickly do you do that, or what elements do you do of that? Which elements do you push back against? Which elements do you lobby for additional funding? Again, a point that Maxie made very well there, and from our own experience in housing and being board member. So those were good points, and they chime very much with what I'm thinking. The difficulty with that is we have thousands of people on the waiting list. One aspect of that is, can we build our way out of the problem? Probably not as quickly as we would like to be able to do, and there are substantial financial viability issues. So Maxine will be aware that the average cost to build fluctuates wildly across the Highlands, from around about £200,000 a unit on this side of the Highlands, can be upwards of £300,000 in the remote and rural locations, and you're starting to then have problems about overall viability or affordability of rents, and indeed to develop in the first instance. So those are particular challenges. So I think one of the things we're going to need to talk about strategically, as well as here, is that opportunity cost debate. You want to bring your existing stock up to standard, that's absolutely correct, and that's the right thing to do by people who've been paying us rents for many years, absolutely. But then at the same time, all of you have got your inbox clogged full of emails saying, am I ever going to get a house, basically, or words to that effect? And that's the balance. And there isn't necessarily a right or a wrong answer. It kind of depends where you sit with these things philosophically, but I am teeing it up to you. The other part of that challenge is twofold. We do have quite a large amount of existing housing related debt. 42% of the revenue budget goes on paying down our historical borrowings. So that constrains us somewhat. So there is an issue there about our overall ability to be able to do either of those two things I've just mentioned. So we need to factor that in. However, having said that, even if we didn't have a huge amount of historical HRA debt, just take the magical world where we're sitting there debt free, wouldn't that be lovely? But the challenge then would be, I'd still have to go and have a chat with Brian Porter and say, okay, well, there's not much HRA debt. I want to borrow some money, and I'm still constrained overall by the council's total ability to be able to afford to borrow anything for any purpose. And just as I've narrated in relation to the HRA, that's equally challenged. So that's the money side. The final point I would say actually is what we're actually doing a piece of work on. Again, Maxine, this will come back to a point that you made, is to look at the financial viability of the HRA over the following 30-year business 30-year business planning cycle. And what I'll be looking at is the overall viability of stock, what stock makes sense as core stock to retain and invest in, taking into account the cost of actually bringing it up to standard and keeping it there, what stock is economically no longer viable, and how do we get that right objective balance between existing stock investment and new build. It's not a quick piece of work. I've done it in previous authority. It's a 2 to 3 year cycle to get it absolutely correct. But that's where we're starting to move towards in the next stages, and Rory and indeed Brian will be a large part of that process of pulling that work together in a more strategic way. So I'm sorry to hit you with a whole load of fairly complicated housing related stuff here, but hopefully that gives you some overarching ideas about the kind of strategic approach we're trying to take. I'm happy to take any of their questions, or indeed come back in later on as we move through this. And for the more detailed technical stuff, thankfully Rory's there, because I'm quite good at the strategic opinionated stuff, but I need someone who's technically a bit more gifted than I am to explain the nuts and bolts of it. Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Mark. There was a lot of really useful information in there, and you're right, absolutely, to set out the challenges at a variety of different levels on a variety of different subjects, all of which we're having to tackle simultaneously. And those challenges seem to get more difficult to resolve every day. So I think there may be a case for radical solutions being looked at, and I'm sure that that's work that you're actively engaged in. So we'll go to Molly next.
Thanks, Derek, and thank you, Rory and Mark. I really appreciated your very frank words there. I think I'm going to take it back to the doom and gloom angle. I think the sort of positive bit is I think there's a really sensible focus here on heating and energy efficiency. I'm really glad to see that. I think my concern is, obviously the paper does set out that the HRA capital plan review is currently underway. And I think we all know that in this climate, if there's going to be a change to that, it's going to be to conclude that it's less affordable than it currently is. So my question is just to make sure we're absolutely clear for our residents. Would it be fair to say that even if we do agree these investment priorities today, residents may well not see that investment realised? Because if that is the case, and I think it is from the report, I think we should be clear about this, and we shouldn't have, you know, the council putting out any corporate comms, for example, saying or suggesting that we've agreed this amount in our plan and that's all good news. Because you know, one of my big worries about this financial climate is that we are over-promising and under-delivering to our communities, and I think we really need to get out of that habit. Not a criticism of our housing team or our corporate comms team, who all work really well and really hard, but you know, we are looking at millions here in this plan, and it's great, but I don't want to get into a situation where we're not actually able to deliver what we've said we would. Sorry, Derek, you're on mute.
So I am. Not something that happens very often. That's my contribution to the Christmas fund on its way. Tamala, over to you.
Thank you. Most of my concerns and issues are already addressed, and thank you so much, Molly, for bringing it up as well. So, yep, I am happy to hear all these investments coming up, and yeah, there is actually a real issue in front of us with funding as well. Now, I've got all the answers I was looking for, so thank you so much, Mark and Rory, for the report and the answers provided. On top of that, I would like to pass my thank you to Mark and his team for sorting out the housing issue for one of the most vulnerable constituents in our ward, and I'm really, really thankful and grateful for all their support there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. It's always good when, you know, we have the opportunity to thank officers for their efforts. Last but by no means least, Councillor Pauline Munro.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rory. As always, I'm always very appreciative of the housing department. I am in contact quite a lot, as you all know, and I am very lucky that I always get an answer. It's always very truthful. Actually, thank you, Molly, too, because you actually did say the one thing that I was concerned about, and it was the over-promising. I mean, it is a big issue, and we want to get it right. We don't want people to think that, yes, we're agreeing this, so therefore your house is going to be sorted. Because we have lots of these prefab houses and all this. We've got about 4 different estates with them in it. So, you know, we have to be very, very careful of what we put out and make sure it's just the truth, really. But thank you very much, guys. You all do a great job. Thank you.
Okay, Mark. Thanks, Pauline. You don't think you're looking for a reply there?
No, they all asked it, Derek. So thanks, guys.
Okay, right. So what I have to do. I'd ask members. Members are invited to note the summary update on the HRA capital programme. Note the HRA capital resources identified for Easter Ross area. Agree the proposed investment priorities in the HRA capital programme for Easter Ross as set out in Appendix 1, and note that updates on the housing revenue account capital programme will continue to be provided through ward briefings at future local committees as requested by local members, in addition to reporting to Housing and Property Committee. Can we agree those recommendations, members?
Can we allow Rory and Mark to come back in on the questions before we do that?
Certainly, I've no difficulty with that.
Thanks.
Thank. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, let Rory go first. Just more than fine. I'll just make a couple of quick comments at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. There was just a couple of things I think Councillor Smith wanted me to come back on, and so some of that was about getting a more detailed breakdown at the ward and estate level. What we can commit to doing, and we can develop the report a bit more so that the report can reflect this in future. But what we'll commit to doing is providing a more detailed breakdown at ward business as well. I think I'll note that you'll all be used to Jonathan delivering these reports. Jonathan Henderson, he's actually moving on to area manager in Inverness. So it's quite a gaping hole for me to fill, and I do my best. But we will commit to coming to ward business for the 2 wards and providing a more detailed breakdown, but also we'll develop the report so that it can be reflected in the public forum for member scrutiny as well. You did note you did ask some questions about Ish and what we're doing in terms of heating replacements, older models. You alluded to a heating tariff. I think you did say economy 7, but I think you might have meant total heat, total control, which is the one that the OVO Energy is due to withdraw from in March. We do still use as one of our offers. It's very much dependent on what is the appropriate design for the house or the house type and the individual circumstances of the house. We do still use storage heating, but we encourage the tenants and we provide support to tenants to ensure that they're on the correct tariff with their provider. We have communicated with tenants, all tenants who are on storage heating, to make sure that they're aware of the impending shutdown of total heat, total control. And we do have a agreement with some energy advice agencies to assist tenants to change their tariffs to something more sustainable. You asked about our other offers in terms of what we provide. Again, you mentioned air source heat pumps, which are generally considered the most efficient type of heating in terms of our replacement. And they're the ones that generally give us the biggest uplift in the energy performance certificate. And so that's our preferred option. It is obviously dependent on the individual circumstances. We also do provide rooftop solar in some circumstances, and we are looking at how we can manage whole house retrofits in terms of maximising insulation, maximising the efficiency of the heating type, and the efficiency of the windows and doors, and also helping to provide with rooftop solar. So that may become as a whole house retrofit, which can be quite expensive to deliver and quite complex to deliver in one go. Or we might look at doing heating first, then fabric works, or fabric first, depending on how we can roll out the programs and what we're able to tender for at the time. And you also mentioned environmental projects. I'll go to the area teams and I will ask them to attend the ward businesses with a agenda item for environmental projects. I understand from my time as the area manager up that way that we did a bit of works identifying some projects with garages and garage sites. So I'm not sure if that's how that work is progressing, because I've kind of moved on, but I will look into that and I'll get the area teams to come back to you on a local level to ensure that you've got sight of that and at least able to provide some feedback into that and some direction to that budget. Councillor Loudon, some of you made a comment that it'd be useful to see how many homes the investment relates to, and I think that's really important in terms of the review that we're doing, because the affordability review may conclude that the actual amount is not necessarily a problem, but the actual delivery could be where we see the issue. And I think Councillor Nolan alluded to that as well in her question, that it could be less about the amount that we're setting aside for investment, but more about how many homes we can deliver investment to. And I know that would be very high on councillors' agenda, because as much as we get that contact from our engagement with tenants, you would get that from your constituents, you know,
yeah.
Well, when's my kitchen being done? When's my heating being done? And so what we're looking for is to, there's two sides to this. One is purifying the data and information we've got so that we can be more strategic about our rollout of investment, but also managing that investment to the properties that are in most need, that are viable to invest in, which is another thing that that Mark alluded to as part of his comments earlier. I'll take issue with him personally about the mentioning whether or not I might be gifted in one way or another, but I'm not so sure about that. And so I think I've covered everything, but in terms of the comments from Councillors Collier and Munro, it's always gratifying to hear that councillors are having a good experience with interactions with our service. So I'll make sure that I pass that on to the individuals involved, and if there's anyone you want me to particularly chase up, please just email me and I'll personally pass those comments on, particularly as they've been expressed in this public forum. Thank you.
Okay, Rory. Maxine, you have your hand up. So
I know,
do you
sorry
want to come
come in
back
again, but
no problem.
Rory raised a couple of things I forgot about the garages. Don't know how, because it was a big issue for us. It was a couple of years ago. Yeah, I'd love to see how we're getting on with that, because things seem to take so long. Just about the you're saying you are negotiating with or helping our constituents that have storage heating and how to use it, etc. The issue with that and the total control and the change of tariff is that SSC particularly do not have any engineers in this area. I've had quite a lot of people say to me, I can't get my tariff changed, including myself. I've now got air source heat pump a couple of years ago, and I got it with partial grant, and I had storage heaters, and what a difference it's made. But I can't get my meter changed. I've phoned up endless times. They will not change my meter. I was told at first they would change it when they put a smart meter, but they're not even putting a smart meter on now, because they tried one next door and there's no signal. I do live in a rural area, so yeah. You know, I can't get a new meter, so I'm still on the old tariff, which is really annoying, because I should be on some sort of new, sort of greener tariff. So maybe when you are, if you are speaking to any of the energy companies or even Mark, we can raise this as a huge issue in Highland. We need SSE and other energy providers to step up to the plate and come and sort our meters out. Thank you.
Mark, I see you've got your hand up there. You maybe got a reply for Maxine.
Yeah, what a good idea that is, Maxine. I hadn't sort of been so aware of just the sort of basic challenge of being able to get a mobile signal to make a smart meter actually work, and it strikes me that that's perhaps something that we could sort of jointly do, both in terms of officers giving you the technical briefing, but also quite bluntly, I think you know, the government need quite a fair amount of pressure applied to them in relation to this, so that they can apply that pressure to SSE, because one of the things that we know very clearly, irrespective of particular tenure type of housing, that, you know, it is more expensive generally, irrespective of what tariff you are on, to live in more isolated rural communities, particularly where the weather draws in and you have to rely on your heating for larger parts of the year, and particularly if you are also vulnerable as well. So there is very definitely a geographical element to this, as well as just the pure cost and the technology issue of that. But I'm sure we would be more than happy to helping sort of build that case so that you can help lobby from the political side, and we can sort of lobby on the technical supply side, and perhaps with others such as the Chartered Institute of Housing, because I'm sure that colleagues in other rural locations across the whole of these islands will have similar problems, whether you're talking about remote North Wales, for example, or indeed Devon and Cornwall, which similarly have their geographical challenges. So I think that would be a really interesting piece of work. The only other observation I've got is all of this and everything that we've talked about today in relation to housing all comes back down to opportunity cost about what you invest in, new stock or existing stock, and sitting underneath that is the question about viability, because there will come a point when we are looking at individual units, and Pauline, you were talking about some of the challenges with prefab stock, etc., which I completely recognise. Comes a point where the cost to improve the energy efficiency of something by 1 percentage point or 1 RDSAT point is so expensive that it simply does not make any economic or rational sense. And I have to throw that on the table, not just because of the comments I made earlier on about the financial viability, such as it is at the minute about the HRA, but also because of the fact that at the end of the day, our major source of income is tenant rent money. And so there is a general duty on the council, I would argue, to show best value for money for the council taxpayer, but it's absolutely a double duty when you're talking about spending tenant rents, because most tenants don't have a lot to start with. So you have to be particularly driven by value for money and making sure that you're actually spending things effectively. Now, I'm just teeing up to you that having done this before, there are challenges that this brings, and one of those challenges will be that inevitably we are going to get to a point with some stock where there is no economic justification to retain that unit of stock, because the amount of money required to be invested in it is such that it will not ever get a sensible level of economic return, and in fact in some cases proves to be primarily abstractive. In other words, it's going to cost you more to manage and maintain and invest in than it's ever going to bring in rent. And when you consider the points I've just made about the importance of HRA tenant rent money and why it's doubly incumbent on us not to waste that, then you can see that there are going to have to be some difficult challenges about us coming back to you and saying to you as members, I'm sorry, this stock does not make economic sense. And I'm just being completely upfront with you about that just now. I don't want to sort of obviously prejudge the outcome of a process that we haven't kicked off yet, but that's been my experience in other authorities, and having done this exercise 2 or 3 times now previously, that is going to come up against us. So we'll have the challenge of investing in existing, investing in new build, but there is also going to be a challenge of us saying, do you know what, some of our stock actually does not work, and what are we going to do about fixing that? And that's all about, I suppose, that opportunity cost debate. So let's see where it takes us. But it's going to be interesting. It's certainly never dull. These are interesting discussions. We're talking about investments of hundreds of millions of pounds over the coming years. So it's actually big and really important stuff. And sometimes it sort of slides under the radar a bit when people are panicking about council tax, understandably, and what rate are we going to do that, and what about the general fund, etc., etc. You know, the HRA is big business, and it affects a lot of people's lives, and the money side of it is just as significant as on the general fund side, and we've got to get these decisions right for all the reasons I've mentioned. But I'll stop there. I could go on all day about it, as you probably have guessed from what I've said already. Thanks, Derek.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Enthusiasm for your chosen specialist subject is never a bad thing, in my opinion. So thanks for that. Right, we are all at the end of the discussion. Can we agree the recommendations that I referred to earlier as set out in the report? That's agreed. Thanks. Okay, we'll move on. The next item on the agenda.
Councillor Loudon, can I just, I don't know, you may not have noticed, Councillor Ryan has asked if the next item, which is the place-based
Investment programme,
could be delayed. He's had to disappear to do something, and he was hoping that this one, he said, could the next item be kept till he returns?
He was hoping I would go so slowly that he'd be back before we got to it, but sadly we've moved along. Okay, yeah, that's not an issue. And I think the education officers are with us. I think I've seen Derek Martin. So item 6 on the agenda is the various ASG overviews, which Derek, you're there. Do you want to introduce those? And thanks for the update we got this morning. That's very helpful. Okay, just over to you, Derek.
Morning, Chair, and morning, members. So there are 3 papers here, for one for Alness, one for Invergordon, and one for Tain ASGs. And as the Chair has alluded to, there's been an updated paper gone to you this morning regarding Invergordon, where there was some adjustments to statistics within them. So I presume we will simply withdraw one of those papers and insert the amendment. So the 3 are similar in terms of the reports. It's an update on information relating to the schools within the ASGs and gives various links to other reports such as HMI and so on. If we look at Alness ASG, you can see there in 1.2 an overview of the number of pupils and settings and so on. If I take you down to 4.1, you can see the links to the web pages that might be useful to have a look at. And 4.2 gives a summary of the standards and quality reports from the schools themselves. And 4.3 will give you an indication of latest HMI reports. You can see that some of them exceed 5 years, and we would expect that those schools that are plus 5 years are likely to be coming onto the radar for HMI for inspection in due course. If you have a look at the 6.1, which is the attainment profile, you'll have had a chance to look through the schools there against the Highland and the national percentages. And there is some more specific data for Alness Academy for against the Highland and national picture as well. With Alness Academy, you can see at the bottom of 6.1 a little graph which shows the academy against its virtual comparator. So a virtual comparator, you might recall, is a generated comparison where they take the statistics and compare it to a virtual school. And you can see there that Alness Academy are slightly ahead of their virtual comparator. Now, that's not to say that that's the only picture there, not at all. It's just the comparison to the virtual school. And there is much work, of course, to continue to improve irrespective of the comparator itself. In 6.2, we get an overview of the positive destinations for Alness Academy, again against the Highland picture and against the national picture. And then there's a further breakdown with regards to those positive destinations and where ex-pupils have headed on to. And you can see a summary there that includes continuing education, training, employment, and various other bits and pieces there. Rather than go through all 3 ASGs, it's probably good to pause for the moment to see if members have any questions around Alness ASG. Might be useful, because otherwise we'll lose track of where we're at. So, Chair, I'm happy to take questions as best I can around Alness ASG, first of all.
You're on mute, Derek.
It's Molly first, followed by Maxine, and then Pauline.
Thanks,
Morning,
Derek.
Molly.
Good morning, Derek. 2 Dereks, goodness. Just regarding the attainment profile for the primary schools in Alness ASG, I mean, the profile for Kilturn in Everton is really poor, and for Obsdale is to be honest, it's just awful. And this is a really sad report actually to see. So could you give us a sense? I mean, I see that at the sort of secondary level, we kind of improve a bit, but we're still far behind Highland and national averages for attainment, even at secondary level. So do you have a sense of, you know, what's being done in these schools to improve the attainment levels? Because these are really shocking figures, actually, and I think our communities will be quite worried about them.
So we have 3 stages of support for all our schools, which range from a universal support right through to an intensive level of support. At Kilturn Primary School, the substantive head teacher has been on maternity leave. There's an acting head teacher in place who has a plan, along with support from our collaborative lead officers, and that is a regular support to look at the school improvement plan and to ensure that that is progressing in a satisfactory manner. I mean, looking at the dates, bear in mind you're looking at 21-22 there, and so it'll be interesting to see what difference there is over time, and we'll get those details, of course, in a rolling fashion. And so collaborative lead officers help support the head teacher with quality improvement and moving things forwards. Similarly, in Obsdale, there is a clear school improvement plan in place. There is a recently appointed head teacher, and due to the nature of the needs at Obsdale Primary School, the local authority have taken the decision that although it's normally a teaching head post, in this case the head teacher will be non-class committed for the next 2 years, in order to give the head teacher the time and resource to help make the necessary improvements. And that new head teacher has, of course, welcomed that level of support. Now, similarly to Kilturn, there's a very high level of engagement with collaborative lead officers, partly due to the attainment levels, but also because it's a new head teacher, and we normally put in that extra level of collaborative lead support during this time. Just picking up on Cool Hill as well, if I may, is that they were recently inspected, and there is good progress through their plan with following the HMI inspection.
Thank you.
Okay, Maxine, over to you.
Thanks, both Derek's. Yeah, Molly's mentioned some of the things I was going to question about primary schools, so we don't need to go over that. So it just leaves me to say just a bit of a thank you for the work that's been done at Allness Academy to help things move forward there. You know, there have been issues, and I believe that the things that have been put in place and a few changes that have happened will really see a significant difference and improvement. I will want to come back about Invergordon later, but I'll wait till you've done the report.
Thank you. I'll pass on your kind comments. With Allness Academy, there's again a significant level of collaborative lead support, and Fiona Grant, the head of service, is working closely with the Academy as well. So it's good to see that there's a high level of support there. And of course, with all these things, the proof is in the pudding, and it's having high expectations and working hard as a school team to make those improvements. But thank you. I will pass on your kind comments.
Okay, and Pauline, over to you.
Well, I was kind of going to say the same thing as Derek, actually, because although these figures are quite old now, there is some actually really good news about Allness recently, specifically in Obsdale and in Cool Hill. Our new head in Obsdale has an amazing plan. Myself and Councillor Collier got to hear it all on the day of the interview. She's doing some amazing work. I'm sure you'll agree, Tamala. So in that respect, I'm really pleased that she's getting a lot of support and she's getting a lot of help. We also had a few concerns in Cool Hill. Now that they're getting a lot more help, they're getting a lot more support. So although the figures are old, I think the next lot of figures that will come out will be the proof of the pudding, as we say. Allness Academy, similarly, there's a great big package gone in there to help out. So, you know, I'm not saying that they're good figures, they're not. But going forward, you know, all I can say is that at the moment, I'm feeling a lot happier that our schools that were in need of getting support are now having support in place. Actually, it's in place. So thank you, Derek. I am very pleased about that. And thanks for all your comments, Derek.
Thank you.
Okay, Derek, I think that looks like the Allness ASG is covered. So do you want to move on to comments on the Invergordon one?
So, of course, for Invergordon, I need to move to a different document now for the updated one. So bear with me as we do that. So again, in 4.1, members, there are links to the web pages which you may find useful. Again, 4.2 looks at the standard and quality reports. These are generated by the schools themselves and show where things are at, both for the schools and for their early learning centres. Similarly, you can see in 4.3 the HMI reports from Education Scotland. You'll note that Invergordon Academy was inspected in March 23, and we note that there are 3 schools there that are plus 5 years. So we would be expecting HMI to be focusing on them in the coming year or two, I would imagine. You can see that the attainment profile in 6.1 again shows the primary schools against the Highland and national statistics, and similarly for Invergordon Academy, looking at the by the end of S3 as against the local and national. In Invergordon Academy, we have a new head teacher, Morven McAndrew, and she's moving forward with the school improvement plan. If you look at the virtual comparator graph, you can see that Invergordon is at or slightly below the virtual comparator, and so certainly want to get up to the virtual comparator as a first step and then exceed that. Similarly, in 6.2, we've got some statistics there around the positive destinations for the Academy against the Highland and National statistics. You can also see then again the percentages of children who are moving into higher education or other forms of training or employment or other activities. So again, I'm happy to take questions surrounding Invergordon Academy Chair.
Thanks, Derek. And there are a number of hands up. So Maxine, you're first, followed by Tamala, and then Pauline.
Thank you. Well, it is disappointing to see the word weak in the attainment level in Invergordon Academy. You know, after many, many years of Invergordon leading and being so good and high up there, and now it's down to weak. You know, I know I can't expect you to say in a public forum what's caused this, but maybe would like a bit more information privately. What are we doing to address this, and how quickly can it change around? because you said the HMI report was March, so it's quite recent. And then coming on to the primary schools, I just want to say a huge well done to Newmore Primary, and an even better huge well done to Park Primary, who doesn't have a building. Which brings me on to when is it going to have a building? I know you can't answer that, Derek, but I just want you to reassure me that you are keeping liaising and being honest with the parents. I haven't been able to attend the last two stakeholders groups, but I know my colleagues have, or some of them. So I do get reports back. But you know, we gave them false hope, saying that the capital programme was again coming to October's full council, but it didn't really come to it. It was just more of the same. It was just actually saying what was happening with the current programme. So we're still not above the line with regard to capital build. And I know you can't answer that, but we need to be realistic and telling the parents how it really is and what hope there might be. And I hope that there will be hope next year. I hope that when it comes to full council, the next capital update, and when we get the LEAP funding through, if we get the LEAP funding through, that we will see some changes. But meantime, we've got to do our best to house them where they are. Well, obviously, their schooling isn't suffering because the attainment is high. So again, if we could pass on a well done to them and to Newmore too, and if you could let me know about Invergorn Academy. Thanks.
Thanks for that, and yes, I will pass on your kind comments. Thank you. With regards to Invergordon Academy, following HMI, the school were required to update their improvement plan, and we'll take that forward. It's well timed with a new head teacher there as well. And again, there is close support from collaborative lead officers to help the school's management team to take forward those improvements. With regards to Park Primary School, yes, there's, despite the challenge of not having their own physical building, you can see that the standards and quality report is in a good place. Now, we have met with the Parent Council just before the October break, and that was attended by myself and the Executive Chief Officer, and we were very realistic about things. Now, the head teacher was quite clear that the facilities that they currently have are better than the facilities that they actually had in their old school. Now, whilst the community, of course, would love to have a brand new school built tomorrow, that is a matter for the council and its capital programme. But the head teacher reported very positively, which is reflected in their standards and quality report, that they have good facilities, good safe facilities at Invergordon Academy, and a really good working relationship between the primary and the secondary. One of the advantages in a difficult situation for them was they've maximised on opportunities last year for transition from primary 7 to S1, which of course being co-located gave really good opportunities. And the head teachers of both schools were meeting together to talk about the use of some of the shared facilities and so on to ensure that there's equity across the piece. The Parent Council reported that they were pleased with the realistic discussion that we had with them, and the reality, of course, of the matter is that this is dependent on the capital programme and full council decisions in due course. And so it's really good to hear that despite the challenge of the fire, that learning progresses at Park Primary School, and they're making the very best of the excellent work that's been put in by our estates team. And I see that Mark is here today, and it would be good for one service to say to the other service, thank you for a robust response and significant investment to ensure that the young people and staff of the Park primary community have got, really good facilities to keep them going. And in fact, those facilities are much better than many of our schools, other schools in Highland. And so whilst we would love, of course, to have that lovely new Park primary school, what they have just now is in no means a poor cousin. They're doing well, and great staff supporting our community. So I will pass on your thanks around that.
You're on mute again, Derek. Sorry.
I don't know why I'm muting. It's just not making any sense. I've never done this before. Tamala, it's over to you next.
Yeah, thank you so much for the report. And we all know that Invergordon Academy has gone through a wee bit of a troubled time, but now it's picking up, and I can see it improving on a daily basis. And with the new head teacher's appointment, and she's doing a very lot of a very good work with the staff and the kids. So yeah, and I'm waiting to see a new HMI report to come through, because I'm positive there will be good improvements in that as well. I see and I experience the improvement in the kids, with my children being in the academy as well, and also Park Primary and all the other primary schools. What a marvelous job they're doing with the trouble and all sorts of issues that they have to go through on a daily basis. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the staff members, head teachers, and working together in the small ASG group to keep everything, to overcome all the challenges and provide the best service for the kids. And I am ever so hopeful that we will see good improvement in these reports in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next individual is Pauline.
Gotta be here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very similar to everybody else. Delighted with the new appointment in Invergordon Academy. I've met with Marvin a few times now. She's absolutely engaged. She's actually doing a tremendous job, and she's working alongside Park Primary School so well, which was really nice to see, that everybody's working so hard to make sure there's an outcome for all, not just, because it could become complicated. They're making it not complicated, and that's making a huge difference for the children in Invergordon. The head teacher in Park Primary School, what can I say? She's done an amazing job at looking after all these wee kiddies after all this trauma. We all know that, and we're all very grateful. And of course, we want to pass on our messages. The other one is South Lodge, a great head there. I mean, the things now are, I feel, I've never felt so engaged with all the schools as I am now in my local area, especially in Alness and Invergordon, because they want to reach out, they want to speak to us, they want to tell us what they're doing, and I think that's only a good thing. And it might mean that sometimes we ask them silly questions, but that they have been absolutely tremendous, and I've got nothing but credit to give to them all, and of course, Derek, to your staff who are putting in huge resources to our local area, and it's not going unmissed, so thank you.
Thank you for your kind comments.
Thanks, Pauline. The last person with a hand up is Mark Rogers.
Thank you, Derek. It's just to sort of pick up on a couple of the points that Maxine made around Park Primary. It's almost like I'm reminded of the comments I was talking about in relation to the HRA item earlier, and about opportunity cost of decisions taken when we have a certain amount of money available for allocation across a range of different competing priorities. And as ever, it's never about right or wrong. It's about what people choose to prioritise over other things given limited resource, and it is really challenging. Those discussions at full council and elsewhere have been difficult, and I don't think anybody's taken any of those decisions lightly. From an officer's perspective, I've said often, some of you may have heard me say it before, there are only 4 things I really need to be able to build you anything from a 1,500 people school to a public convenience, and that's land infrastructure, money and planning. And if we've got all 4 of those things sitting in front of me, then it's not a problem. The rest of it's just a matter of logistics, to be perfectly honest with you, and we do that all the time. Park has proved to be really problematic, Maxine. I was there actually, I think 3 weeks into my job here at Highland Council when that happened. So I didn't even know where Invergordon was, and I had to drive up there in the dark and hope I didn't miss it on the way. And then arrived into the main hall at the academy there, and to hear the discussions about what was going to happen next, and obviously to hear the voice of the parents, and indeed to meet some of you as members just as I'd started here. And you're right, you know, that commitments were made at that time. I think they were made in good faith. I will be perfectly honest with you about that. But, you know, lots of commitments are made in good faith and then have to be changed because the funding envelope or resources just do not allow that to happen, or indeed different decisions are taken about prioritisation, which is the other side of that coin. That's where we find ourselves as it stands at the moment. So the difficult part of this conversation is, as it stands right at the moment in time, it is not included in the capital programme as such at the present time. We understand that as a result of the decisions that were taken at council recently. That's factually the case. That being said, I've been here 4 years now, and in every year I've been here, there's been a review of the capital programme. So what I'm saying represents the position at today. So at today, it's not in the programme, but again, programmes are subject to regular review. I think the final point I would make, though, is this, that there's a lot of discussion around LEAP funding, and I just think it's important, and I'm sorry if I'm telling you things you already know, but I do need to reiterate this to be absolutely clear about it. LEAP funding is not a universal panacea to the council's problems about building new schools. What LEAP funding is 25 years revenue funding contribution towards the running cost of a school, which of itself will have an asset life of 60 years. So actually the council's still got to find 35 years running money after the LEAP money runs out. But luckily for all of us on this call, we will not be bothered because we'll all be long retired by that time, well, possibly with the exception of Molly. But certainly the rest of us will all be kicking back, and then Molly will be going, they've sold us a pup here, look what I've got to try and fix. But that is the truth of it, being absolutely honest about it. It's 25 years revenue funding, and then after that we're on our own. And what that also means, unfortunately, is that even if we get LEAP funding for any school, but let's just take Park as the example, say we get a phone call from the Scottish Government saying, congratulations, you've won the prize for Park. Well, that's about, last time I looked at it, was about 15 or 16 million construction cost, of which I think 3.5 million is available from insurance money. So it's still got a net figure of around about 12 million to fund. Council's got to borrow that from its capital programme. So if it takes that view and we are successful in any of the LEAP bids coming through, then what that means in practice is the council would then have to form a view about whether or not it could afford to borrow the capital sum to build the school in the first place, and then it will get the LEAP money in terms of revenue monies coming in. So any school that we do get that is successful in LEAP funding bids that are in, and there are 5 of them at the present time, clearly there is a capital programme implication for that, and that would probably have to come back once it's been considered by the administration. That would have to come back as a decision for council. So I'm afraid, you know, I thought about this when it was being discussed in council during last week. Some people were getting this point very well, and others seem to be thinking, well, do you know what, it's okay if we get LEAP, everything's fine. No, it isn't fine if we get LEAP. We've still got the capital issue to address, and that doesn't mean it can't be addressed, but it does mean, going back to what I was saying earlier on, there's an opportunity cost. So if we get LEAP for one school and it's going to cost us 15 million in capital, what else comes out of the programme in order to allow that to come back into it is one of those debates. So it does become quite complicated, and I know Derek will appreciate this with his general financial hat on. It's not just as simple as saying LEAP is the answer to everything. It's helpful, but it's not as helpful as some people think. But nonetheless, that's where we are at with Park. And thank you, Derek. I appreciate that. I was actually out. Molly will know this because she was on the call, and so was Tamala. That we did have a meeting just last week, actually, with the head teacher and 2 of the parent council staff, and you know, had a similar sort of kind of conversation that Derek was talking about there, and they said much the same sort of kind of things. Actually, I was heartened by how pragmatic they were about a situation, having been promised a range of things in the past, which we've now had to say, I'm sorry, for the time being, it doesn't look like we're going there. Actually, they were very pragmatic and reasonable about it, whereas they would have been within their rights to be perhaps slightly more irritable about it. They weren't, and they were very much looking forward to the future and what options we might be able to deliver for them, if indeed not a new school. In an ideal world, we would give them the new school that we have said we were going to do, but I'm afraid at the minute we don't have the capital capacity to be able to do that. That's a decision that the council has reached, and correctly so, frankly, but based on the finances. But that is an ever-moving feast. And so it's not now, but it's not never. And in fact, the council was very clear in saying that in effect what it is doing is temporarily deferring these issues pending future decisions on funding. It's never going to happen. I think I'm also right in saying that as well, but I'm sure Derek will keep me straight if I'm misrepresenting the administration. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think the last point is the one that certainly that we've been sticking to. I mean, these projects which were in the capital programme are deferred. They're not cancelled, and that's I think the important message that all of us need to be aware of. What I would say, I was interviewed last week by Ian Ramage, and I was making the point that Molly made earlier on. What had happened in the previous administration is that they had, they'd overcommitted and under-delivered, and those were the exact words I used with him. And I don't know whether that was broadcast or not, but I don't have time to watch myself. But I think that's the important thing to take from this as well. I think things have very much turned the other way. We're much more limited now in terms of what we're promising and what we're committing to. But that doesn't mean if things improve, extra funding appears, interest rates fall, the rate of inflation declines significantly, costs stabilise. Those are all things that would mean that we're able to come back, look at this again, and deliver more than we were able to in the capital programme we announced last month. So yeah, I don't want anybody to go away thinking the position is hopeless. It isn't. I'm hopeful that not everything can go the wrong way for too long. At some point, some of those things that have all turned negative for us over the last couple of years will come round again, and we'll start to see some positive improvements in terms of what we're able to deliver. Okay, right. So if I go back to the paper. The committee is invited to note the summary updates on the. The committee is asked to keep going.
Maybe handy chair, if I may.
Item 6.
I could look at 10 ASG before you go back
before I
agreeing
do that.
to the.
Indeed,
if
Derek,
that's helpful.
you're quite right.
Yeah.
Now, how can I forget about my own ASG area?
So yes, 10 ASG. Again, 4.2 will give you an outline of the position with regards to the standards and quality reports. Egerton and Gledfield, of course, has its new head teacher in post. Hill of Fern and Tarbert Old, following their the inspection at Tarbert Old, are making good progress against the inspection, with an acting head teacher in there just now, and in particular the acting head was noted for some of her work. If we look at similarly in 4.3, you'll see the timing of inspection reports. So Tain Royal Academy last done in 2018. Craig Hill recently with an action plan, but we're we're very happy with the accuracy of that report. But you do see a number of schools there that are plus 5 years, and so again, would be interested to see where HMI are going to go next. In terms of 6.1, you can see the attainment profile again at P1, 4 and 7. And for Tane Royal Academy at the end of S3. And again, if you look at that helpful graph, you can see that the virtual comparator schools in the light blue are slightly ahead of TRA. And again, we want to meet and then exceed the virtual comparator in terms of making good progress. Again, in 6.2, we get an indication of positive destinations. And you can see yourselves there, again, heading towards further or higher education, employment, or various other destinations. Of course, around this, we have the new campus progressing. Again, I should go back to Mark and say thank you from one service to another for the hard work around that. Now, again, these are complex new builds that we're seeing, and the Tane campus currently is on track. We'll present more information at a stakeholder meeting, which I believe is coming up reasonably shortly, and of course further briefings can be given at ward business meetings. But it's pertinent to this report in as much that going forward, you'll have Craighill, Knockbreck and Tane Royal Academy becoming one school, and St Duthas being co-located on the same campus. And so that means a new head teacher and so on. So it'll be interesting over the next year or two to see how things evolve and change and progress. So with regards to Tane ASG Chair, very happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Derek. I've got Maureen has a question to start off with. I don't know whether Alistair's rejoined us, and I'll come in after Maureen.
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Derek and his team, his colleagues in education. This in itself has been an education to me today. I have worked with Hilton of Cadwell Primary School for many, many years in a community capacity, but I'd just like to say to Derek and his team that I will be taking an active part in their parent-teacher meetings as well from now on, just to get a feel for how the school is doing. I know we have an acting head at the moment. He is excellent. We have a great rapport with him in the community. So I'm looking forward to Hilton continuing to do well. And that's really all I have to say at the moment. So thank you very much, Derek.
Thank you for your kind comments. Yes, the acting head teacher at Hilton of Cadwell, we're likely to keep in place for the moment until we see how things are reorganised with Knockbreck, Craighill and Inver Primary as well, which is linked with Knockbreck. So we need to do a bit of a movement around the piece in the Eastern Seaboard area. So, but I will pass on your kind comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. And yeah, I suppose there are rather a lot of questions in the Tane ASG at the moment. You know, we had the opportunity to meet the interim head at TRA. Certainly found that very enlightening. He's got a very clear focus on, whilst being very supportive of the work that was done prior to his arrival. You know, he's a clear plan and a programme in place, and certainly we were very impressed with him and his plan for the future. There clearly there are issues with the 3 to 18 campus site, which Mark has been dealing with. I've been contacted again today by one of the residents, and Provost Ferguson. I think the pumps were switched off, Mark, and the water found its own route again. So yeah, that's an ongoing concern, and hopefully we can have a meeting fairly soon about that. In terms of attainment, Tain I think is doing well. The Tain ASG more broadly, and the academy in particular. So I think we always look for improvement. The only area where I could see across the ASGs, there's maybe a sort of common problem was maybe in writing, which in one or two areas was something that seemed to be picked up on. So I don't know, is that I don't know if you have a lead on that, and whether there's ongoing work to look specifically at writing. The other areas we seem to be much more in line with comparators and across Highland and nationally. But that was the one area where there looked to be a few different locations who had an issue there. So if I can come to Derek first, and then Mark, I'll come to you afterwards.
Thanks, Chair, for your comments. And yes, we have in Highland quite a significant literacy and numeracy programme, which are being implemented across our schools. And again, where schools have identified through their standards and quality and attainment reports, then that helps to inform their next steps with their school improvement plans, so that one informs the other and is in that cycle of evaluation. And so again, we're indebted to our head teachers and our collaborative lead officers who are working together to make those ongoing improvements and improvements that are needed.
Yeah, I think there's always a sort of benchmarking and best practice opportunity in areas like this. And I just wondered if we had identified who are sort of best practice providers were across the Highlands, and whether they had input into that process of helping the others along. Maybe there's things we can learn from others who are doing things slightly differently.
So one of the key roles of the collaborative lead officers is to share what they've seen as good practice. They visit a number of schools, and it's certainly not unusual for schools who have identified an area for improvement for them to undertake not just evaluation of where they're at and the plan going forward, but some of the practical things would involve refreshing the resources, refreshing teaching and learning approaches. And sometimes that would include visiting other settings. The collaborative lead officer might say, such and such a school did this last year and had some quite significant changed results. And so a teacher or two may go there, have a look at it, report back to their own team, and so on. So yes, very much so, we should be looking and reaching out to other schools and sharing success and getting the good ideas to move things forwards.
That's excellent. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. So thanks, Derek. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Derek. I'm just going to make a couple of quick comments in relation to 10 Campus because, as you correctly commented on, it has filled up the inboxes of a number of members on this call as well as myself. It's a challenging situation, and I think candidly from the email exchanges that have passed back and forward between offices and indeed Keers as the lead contractor here, there have been some issues. And whilst I'm being cautious in my language because this is a public meeting, we have very clearly communicated what our expectations are of Keers and what we feel that they need to be doing that they are not, in our mind, currently doing to prevent an ongoing recurrence of the challenges that I know that you, Derek and Alistair in particular, have raised with me in relation to that site. From a technical perspective, part of the challenge is that the ground conditions on the site are not good and have known to be not good historically in terms of flooding and water retention. And whilst what we are fairly confident of is once we've got to the stage of actually being able to install all of the drainage and hook it up into the mains as part of the construction programme, that should, in the longer term, actually stop this from happening at all. But that does not deal with the short-term issue around pumping and water storage whilst we get to that point in the construction timetable where we can get the drainage fully installed and connected up in the manner that I've just discussed. So in the meantime, both Finlay and I have been actively involved in that. I'm sorry to hear yet again, that's why I was sort of sighing exasperatedly on camera in the background, yet again, only at least it's not an email this time, Derek, but nonetheless, you know, it's another issue being raised about pumps not having worked and so on and so forth. Now, we're quite clear, and we have been quite clear to Keers, that actually the on-site staff that they have there have done their absolute level best to try and sort this situation out, and that they are not being properly supported at perhaps a more strategic level. And I know Finlay had that conversation directly, and indeed he copied you into that, Derek, and I think yourself, Alistair, as well, to say, do you know what? And he gave them quite a stern position from the council, which was justified and evidence led. So that's fine to refer to it here. I will speak to him once I'm off this call today. I do have some time free in my diary today, and reinforce to him yet again that notwithstanding the fact that we've already given a fairly direct set of instructions to Keir, here we are on again on a Monday morning after it's rained, facing the same problems, getting the same quite correct amount of complaints and grief actually from local residents. I don't blame them, they are right to do that. I acknowledge that, and we will absolutely be taking this up further again with Keers, and I can only apologise to you as local members for the amount of additional work that this is causing. I do share that frustration, even if I'm not being contacted direct by residents. I'm certainly getting it through both of yourselves quite correctly so, and we will continue to do everything we can with Keers to get this fixed before the permanent solution is in place. And as you mentioned, Derek, that's fine. I'm more than happy for Finlay and I to try and work with yourselves as local members to get a meeting together face to face in person, ideally including people from Keers if we can manage that to take this forward, because I know back and forward by email is sometimes tricky, and I'm just I suppose I'm taking the opportunity here to start that conversation ahead of that meeting taking place. Thank you.
We'd before I say any more, I think we'll let Alistair in. He's been sitting there very patiently.
No, not at all. Sorry, I missed the first part of this discussion. So I'll come back to the educational part in a minute, but just responding to yourself, Mark, you know, a suggestion was made by myself and supported by other members of a quick solution behind the existing properties of putting in a gravel drain connected with a pipe connected to an outflow somewhere. And, you know, it'd be interesting to see why officers, they haven't come back about that, so I don't know if it's been ruled out or not, but that certainly would have given a positive move to the 5 or 6 houses that are having this problem, that the council have done something and hopefully it would work. This problem in Moss Road has been going on since I've been a member of the council, and I remember speaking to one of the Morrison directors, and they were very reluctant to do that. they owned the field at the time. They were reluctant to do that. And, you know, there was a particular house in Moss Road that had water running through the garage all the time. But I think the sooner we have that meeting face to face with the people we need to have, the better for us, really, to see if we can bring it to a satisfactory conclusion. I mean, every time we're waking up and it's raining, I'm driving down Moss Road just to see what is the problem like today. So, you know, it's although certainly what's been done in the last couple of weeks has been a help, we don't know when we next have the next rainstorm what it will be, you know. So if you could push that meeting on ASAP, I'd be grateful. Coming back to the educational side of things in this paper, I'm sorry I missed the first part, but I was just wondering, I met with the head teacher, like Derek. There were separate meetings we had, but I got on fine with them, and I found them very ambitious and had a good plan of attack for the school, which the previous management at the school had as well. But we've had a problem there with two key figures at Tainwell Academy were taken out at the one time, and then one person was put in, and other people were acting up. So when you lose a management structure like that, it is very difficult for somebody new to come in and pick up all the pieces. But he was telling me that he probably is only in position till Easter time. So the question I would ask is, how are we getting on with the management structure for the new campus when it's ready? And will members be involved? No doubt will be involved at the interview stages, but will members be involved on how you see the management structure working before it goes out at an advert stage? And also about the name for the school. I see the chairman of the parent council wrote in or sent an email in recently with 3 or 4 points to Callum Sinclair, I think it was, and now he's resent it again because he's awaiting a reply. So, you know, I think members need to know what's happening with the proposals for the management structure at the new 318 campus. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There has been no significant change in the proposals for the structure of the new school, other than possibly that we're moving from the idea of 4 deputy heads to 5 deputy heads. So there'll be 3 allocated largely around secondary and 2 largely around primary, although we shouldn't see them as separate entities. It will be one school with 1 head teacher. And so we're looking at moving towards advertising for the new head teacher fairly shortly. That's based on the timing and working backwards of when the key handover will be. And we expect to have the keys in December 2024. And so working backwards, we need to appoint a new head teacher to give sufficient time to allow for that head teacher to begin to build a virtual new school between the primaries and the secondary in advance of occupation of the building. And similarly, there's lots of other activity to do as well, including things like uniforms and so on, which we think parent councils themselves will be very interested in taking forwards. And also resourcing the new campus as well. It's not just the building itself, but it's the tables, the chairs, the equipment, and so on. And so, yes, the acting head teacher will remain in position until Easter of next year is the current plan. And in between times, we move forward with the business of advertising for the quite a different post, a campus head. In terms of the name, there'll be more detail on that coming out at the stakeholders meeting. We have some ideas from pupils, staff, community. For names, we need to conduct an exercise, of course, to ensure we can translate them into Gaelic. So we have the bilingual approach to things. And we're also currently discussing with Lord Lyon's office about whether or not we can retain the title royal or not. And so we await a response on that as well. So the detail of that will come out through stakeholder meetings, and of course very happy to attend a ward business meeting for some of the finer detail around this, Chair.
Thanks, Derek. I'm sure all of that's a help for Alistair. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Just a quick one in relation to Alistair's point, and thanks very much, made them, Alistair. I wasn't aware, or if I've just simply missed the email in the chaos that my inbox sometimes is, about the suggestion that you made about the drainage ditch in the background. So I don't know if you have the email to hand, Alistair. I wonder if I could ask you just to forward that to me, because I'm not a drainage expert, but I do think that we should be constructively looking at all suggestions, however they are made, and they're always made in good faith. It's always worth having a look at. If that's been considered by others already, then I wasn't aware of that. If it hasn't yet been considered, then I think it should be, and we should give you a clear response as to whether it can be taken forward, or indeed if there are reasons why it can't be. But I'd be happy to do that as soon as possible. So yeah, I mean, on the face of it, I would be happy to look into what you've said. I think that's very constructive. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay. If I can get back to my papers. I take it there are no further questions. In which case, the committee is asked to scrutinise and note the contents of the reports. Can we agree that we've done that, members? Okay, I think that's agreed. Right, the time is moving on, and I'm conscious that I haven't had a break at all. So do members want to pause for 10 minutes, or do you want to continue? I'm pretty easy either way. Helen, you've got your hand up.
Whatever member's response, could you also let me know when you want to go back and pick up item 5, the place-based investment programme, because I've agreed to let Martin and Fiona know so that they join. So break or no break, if you could let me know.
I intend to do that at the end of the break. So I think if we break for 10 minutes, I think that's sensible. We've been here quite a while. So we have a 10-minute break, and then we'll go back to consideration of item 5. Okay, thanks, Helen. So that's back at 12:54.
Involvement with the council. So we sought some advice, because they are the experts in this type of potential disposal. It's not something you can just go to and sell yourself by placing an ad somewhere. It's a very particular market, and it's quite right that we seek the advice of people in that market who know what they're talking about. And council has had a lot of involvement with Sotheby's in the past for various valuations. So they were already looking into and providing us with the type of advice to draw together the information for the request and the structure and the business case that was requested in February 2022. We've also looked at how you would balance the type of sale in the event that this is very much a future consideration, but it's quite right, members, that you all have the background to what we've been considering. So there is stuff in the report about whether it should be a private sale or a public sale. That's not a decision we're making at this stage, because we're not in a position to consider that until we make a decision after the consultation as to whether we even consider sale at all. But it's quite right that you know what all the pros and cons of each possibility are. In addition, we're also seeking the advice of the experts that the council use in relation to procurement. As I'm sure members are aware, it's a very particular area of law, and we want to make sure that we've got the appropriate advice there. So there's that part is contained all in paragraphs 5. There's also a little bit about what the current position is as far as the bust is concerned, the location of the bust, the type of background to the value and the type of offer that's come in at the moment to Sotheby's for consideration of purchase, and where that sits as far as Sotheby's are concerned for value of similar, not just Bouchardon, but similar sculptures in the marketplace. There's then a very important consideration, obviously, and this I think will come through very clearly as part and parcel of any consultation should members decide to go out to consultation, which is whether the council should be selling the bust at all. The members of the community will be able to put clearly what their views are there, and it's one of the things that members must bear in mind in reaching that decision. When there's a number of things then, ethical sale, the issues to do with the Waverley criteria, potential investment of any funds should the bust be sold, and a number of matters all contained, even the type of structure that goes into anything beyond the consultation are all contained in 8, 9, 10 and 11, the paragraphs before you. They're very much the type of information that is there for information purposes at this stage. It's quite detailed so that members have that background. But in the event that we move through the process and we go beyond the consultation stage, at each stage, these paragraphs will form the body of the type of information that will be brought back to members at the appropriate stage for specific decisions at that stage. So it's good and important that members are aware of what the whole process could potentially be. But at this stage, members were asking if you give consideration to whether or not we initiate that process and whether or not we commence a public consultation. So I think I could get completely detailed in all the bits and pieces in the report, and I suspect I'm hoping that everybody's had the chance to read it in detail. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sarah, very much for that and for the written report, which is very detailed and informative. Members with questions, Pauline Monroe is first on this occasion.
Thank you, Derek, and yes, Sarah, thank you for your report. It was very, very good. I suppose for us it would be just to reiterate what would happen if and when the bus ever did get sold. We just want to kind of make it clear if and when a public consultation goes out. There's been a lot of pros and cons online already, so we kind of want to address that and say that, you know, that we are looking at it very seriously. We want things to happen the right way. We don't want any more confusion about it, because there is a lot out there. There has been an awful lot of different aspects of this going around. And I suppose another question I would like to have, I'd like to ask is, you know, if it's decided not to sell, would it be a cost implication for Invergordon going forward? Because certainly it's going to be very expensive to insure now that the price for the thing is out the bag, so to speak. So if it's going to cost Invergordon money to keep it, I don't know if you can answer that, but it's certainly something that I think the local community would be interested to know as well. So I'm sure there's lots of other questions going to be asked, and I'm no doubt you'll hear from us again. Sorry, Sarah, but we've just got so much going round just now. We'd like to just raise the concerns that we do know about it, we are concerned about it, and we are trying to do the right thing. Thank you.
So, Sarah, do you want to tackle the councillors one at a time, or
I think it might be easier so that we don't miss
okay.
anything.
On you go. I'll let you reply.
I mean, as with any consultation, and in some respects, it doesn't really matter how much I break it down in a consultation document and what we put in a document. There will always be misinformation and there will always be misunderstanding. And a lot of that we have to try and defray that by perhaps the way we communicate it in and around in the community. When we do the consultation, we are required to publish the consultation document, we're required to circulate it, we're required to notify and seek representations from community councils and community bodies, and we also accept representations from anybody else in the community. We're not legally required to hold, for instance, public awareness meetings or to do anything else, but there's no reason why we can't do that. And the guidance says that that's one of the things that would vary depending on what the asset is or what the property is, as to whether you would hold that sort of meeting. So it's one of those situations where members local to the area, the Invergordon members, might want to consider if that's something that should be taken forward, some form of public meeting, so that whilst that won't take any representations made orally within the consultation, because the legislation and the guidance requires that they're submitted in writing, it would give people the opportunity of obtaining some clarification. Yes, I mean, the part of the consultation will be to stress that this is an Invergordon common good asset. Any capital receipt that is recovered for the asset can only be, as far as we're at the moment aware, and we've had this confirmed through Scottish Government, can only be used for capital expenditure and or the repayment of the capital of a debt, which Invergordon doesn't have at the moment. But yeah, capital expenditure, so it could be used for some sort of capital investment purpose. What that might be is something that would be appropriate to be considered at an appropriate time should we get to that position. But it's very much to be taken having regard to the interests of and the benefit of the inhabitants of the former borough area. And quite often it's very hard to get that point across, particularly at the moment with there being so much press about the concerns of the costs to the council and things like that. It's a very difficult point to get across. It's a very thorny legal point that we manage this property separately and what common good is. It's perhaps not best served by the fact that every local authority handles it all slightly differently. Yes, and it's a very emotive matter. So I think whilst the consultation document will explain all that and we'll try and get that across, it's about trying to get that information correctly spread throughout the local community.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks. Next up with a question is Molly Nolan.
Thanks, Derek, and thanks, Sarah. It's a really great report, and really, I mean, I've been thinking about it almost non-stop actually, because it's so complex. I think first and foremost top of my mind is I really want to hear the community's view on this, because I know there's a lot of strong opinions, and it would be good to get a wider group of views. And to follow on from what Pauline was saying, there is an awful lot of misinformation out there, and I think it's really incumbent on us and any reporting to make it clear that the money just, if it was to be sold, the money wouldn't just be frittered away or go into general council funds and these kinds of things, because that is a commonly held misconception. I think for me, it's not a question to you, Sarah, but a question that I've sort of been thinking about myself is the asset currently serving the people of Invergordon? And for me, the answer is no, due to the current storage constraints. So I'll admit I was highly sceptical about the prospect of selling at all, but having thought about it an awful lot and read through the pros and cons, I do think there's a sort of an attractive case for looking at it very seriously, particularly if there was to be regular common good income and a replica that could be held locally, because that ultimately is going to serve the community more than the situation that we currently have. But that there's no question in that. It's just me sort of ruminating. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those ruminations. We'll move on to Tamala, who's up next.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I can't put the camera on. It just blurs and freezes my screen. So thank you so much, Sarah, for the report. Can I kindly ask you, is this Sotheby London or Sotheby Edinburgh who's involved in this selling and with the client, the private client? And also, like I said, I don't my personal view is to save the the bust for the community to decide what they want to do, and I strongly believe there should be a consultation with the community. Although I can see the pros and cons very clearly with investing or selling and investing, the investment process is not black and white, and it's not clear enough for people to understand how it's going to happen and how the community is going to impact on it. Yes, we can say, like, if we invest it, there will be 125,000 of annum money coming in, but that's not always black and white. It's not straightforward when it comes to investing. So I believe if we can go into a community consultation, we have to make sure that the investment plans are very clear, put forward to the community, and how the community will be able to impact on a positively or negatively with the investment plans as well. So that's where I am at the moment. Thank you.
If I respond to that, perhaps we've been dealing with specific members of staff at Sotheby's that have specific expertise in the type of property that this is, and they cover, doesn't really matter whether they're based London or Edinburgh, it's their expertise that's important, and it's the expertise in the particular artwork, and this is quite a unique type of artwork. So the representatives of Sotheby's that we've dealt with there are the experts within that auction house that deal with the Bouchardon bust and the piers, etc., the type of sculpture that is. With regard to investment, we've been very careful a little bit about not providing too much information at this stage, only because in the event that we go out to consultation and in the event that the decision is to sell the bust, we then have another process with court. We then have the potential process that, as contained in the report, the Waverley criteria would be triggered, and there has to be a period of time to allow a UK institution, whether that's a museum or whatever it is, to decide if they want the opportunity to purchase it to match the purchase price that's been offered. And if somebody comes forward, there then has to be a period of time to allow them to fundraise to get that money if they haven't got that money. We are extending the time limit beyond any type of consultation that we've yet done with Common Good significantly because of the nature of the asset as a result of these other practices that are going to have to impact on it in the event that we decided to sell. What we might say would be an appropriate form of investment at this stage may not be an appropriate form of investment at the point that the council received that capital receipt. So it's a bit difficult to be too explicit, but what we would say is we would be seeking the appropriate advice. And if that's an external advisor, that's an external advisor to make sure that whatever is done with the capital receipt would be with a view to maximising the income for Invergordon Common Good Fund, because obviously the capital has to be protected as at all possible. It's the capital. We wouldn't be looking to touch that unless it was by way of some sort of specific capital investment. Other than that, it's making sure it would generate sufficient income to be able to make good active use of that income. If we look back on the past 12 months, the situation has changed quite significantly with how we might have invested money 12 months ago to how we might invest it today. So that's my concern a little bit about being too explicit, but that sort of thing we would endeavour to try and explain in some way within the consultation document. It's going to have to be perhaps a more detailed and lengthy consultation document than we've done before. And that has similar problems, because the more and the bigger the document, the harder it is to keep people engaged all the way from the start to the end. When they're reading, they sort of get to a point they find fascinating and then stop. So that's quite a difficult one as well. And again, that's where as much community information that can be conveyed there is important. So I think that's where my reservations are a little bit. The council has a lot of advice at its disposal for how best to invest sums of money, but there may well be something specific that we might wish to consider at the appropriate time if we get to that stage.
Thanks again for the reply, Sarah. Maxine, I think if there's somebody that I did expect to maybe have something to say on this matter, it's probably you. So over to you next.
Thank you, Derek. I just wanted to wait to see what others' views were. Can I first say to Sarah, though, I wish she was my business advisor. Absolutely amazing. And I want to say a huge thank you, first of all. This has been ongoing for 25 years, and it's not just Sarah, it's Helen Ross, it's others, Alison Clark. Many, many people have been involved in this Bouchardon bust over the last 25 years, and I just want to thank them all, because without their work, we wouldn't be at this point. And it's no surprise, and you know my views, I've made them widely over the last 25 years. I do think it's an asset that could be realised financially and give a lot back to Invergordon, but I'm not going to talk about that just now. I do have a few questions for Sarah, and she may or may not be able to answer. I did understand that the bust was currently stored in the Archive Centre in Inverness. But yeah, you're shaking your head. I didn't think it was, because we asked and it wasn't there. So I wondered where it was. And if it's somewhere so secret, I don't mind if you don't want to publicly say. But if we could maybe let members know, you know, in the background. You know, I did think it might even be stored at Sotheby's. I don't know. But anyway, you can answer that later. I wonder how you define community. Because clearly some people that, you know, were born in Invergordon have moved, you know, around the area or even abroad. You know, I wonder how we define community. Is it just people on the electoral roll in Invergordon, or how do we define it? The other thing you mentioned, going out to public sign hearings, the danger with that is the naysayers often hijack these things, so I would be a bit concerned about that being run properly. Obviously, if you were to do it and, you know, take account of everything else, not just the people that might hijack a meeting in Invergordon, because that happens a lot. So yeah, I absolutely, same as Molly and Pauline and everyone, want to hear the views of the community. Yeah, I would love to sell it. Yeah, I would love to have a common good fund that we can invest in Invergordon. However, if Invergordon don't want to sell it, then don't sell it. You know, I mean, you know, I'm near retiring age. I'm not going to be here around that much longer to enjoy whatever this brings to Invergordon. So if the younger folk don't want to sell it, don't sell it. That's kind of my view. So let's see what happens. Let's go out to consultation. I agree it has to take a long time. You know, we've waited 25 years. I don't care if this takes another 2 years. We've got to get it right. And I'm also interested to hear what you said about investment, because that is a rolling feast. It could be you invest it in something initially, but that changes. You know, I did mention investment and the lack of it, the lack of interest we're getting for all the Tain and the Invergordon Common Good Fund at the moment. So we wouldn't want to invest it in whatever that's invested in. And obviously we know interest rates change. Interesting to hear about the what happens if there's an international bidder, buyer, and that has to go out to the UK market. I think that's only fair and right. And to be honest, this has gone all over Europe now with the TV coverage, and I've had CNN on for an interview. So it could be somebody from even further abroad comes over and says, actually, I'll give you 5 million for it. You know, who knows? I understand why we don't put it to auction, and I don't want to do that because that's really, really dangerous. It could sell for 500,000. I think you have covered everything, Sarah. You've got it in hand. You know exactly what's happening from a legal and governance perspective. And yeah, I'm really heartened by that. One final question. When you go out to survey, to consultation, can members have an input in it before it goes out, like questions and things like that? Because I think it's important, because we're seeing what people are saying on social media and people don't understand it. People do think it's going to be spent on the council's roads. And yeah, so we've got a lot of educating to do out there, and that's incumbent on us as members to try and do that. It's not always easy, especially if you get somebody being really negative, but we just have to try and feedback as much as we can and make things accurate. Thank you.
Yes, that's a long list of questions. Yes, obviously the report indicates where it's been stored. What I can say is that Sotheby's have inspected the storage. It's appropriate. It's the correct environment for it to be stored in. It's held as it should be. Everything about the way that bust is stored is perfect. It's not in any way that it's of any detriment to it. It's securely stored and it's in the appropriate environment for it to be stored in. And that's been passed by Sotheby's, so we're quite happy with that. Yeah, the question about community is interesting, and this has raised its head a couple of times from other areas in the Highlands. The legislation requires us to specifically notify the area community councils and to notify any community bodies in the area that might have an interest in it, and thereafter just to publish generally and to take into account or have regard to responses received from members of the public without specifying where those members of the public should be from. So they could just as easily be ex-Invergordon residents who've moved, or what we've done routinely is, because there is no case law on that and the legislation is not clear at all and definitely doesn't specify that they have to have an Invergordon address, is anybody that has an interest such that they want to make a comment in the consultation. We've currently, historically, so far been taking those into account as part and parcel of the consultation. And we've had a number of situations. For instance, we ran a consultation on a caravan park and we ran a consultation on a golf club, both of which routinely had visitors from other parts of the country. In respect to the golf club, they have quite a large international membership, so it was quite appropriate that we took into account any representations we had from those people. So it's very difficult to say we will only restrict it to the people that might currently be resident in Invergordon, because there may well be somebody that has an interest for whatever reason, but isn't directly in Invergordon with an Invergordon address. So I think it's appropriate that we don't restrict that, but so far that's the way Highland's done it. It's not wrong in where, as far as the legislation is concerned, to do it that way. And I can't really think that it would be fair to restrict it, because somebody might have visited, they might have family in Invergordon. There could be any reason why they might want to contribute to the consultation. So that's how we've always done it before. The community may or may not have a view on that. I just think it's a good idea to keep it as wide as possible. Yes, there's always some anxieties about a public meeting. I think any public meeting would have to have a very clear agenda. It would have to have a very clear time for questions. We would have to have an understanding as to how those questions would be managed, and it would have to be chaired very carefully so that everyone had an opportunity to say something. There will always be negative people, there will always be positive people, and there will always be people that only want to listen and don't want to ask a question. and people that like to ask lots of questions. So it's about trying to draw all of that out. If people want to come along to a public meeting, you don't have to have one. The community doesn't have to have a public meeting. Sometimes it's just a good way of trying to defray a lot of the misinformation that may be out there, if you can try and deal with any questions. But equally so, any representation will be responded to. So the information will be published, the response will be published online, so that information can be clarified. But it might be better to almost clarify the information before people sit down and make a representation, so that then their representation is a bit more informed. It does need to be well invested. This is the one thing that we will have to consider and take great care about, and it's why we might need to seek some sort of advice on it, as to what the appropriate investment would be. And I think what you've got to remember is this will then become an active fund, and members, you'll have the monitoring reports, you'll have the scrutiny, you'll be able to ask the questions. And I suspect if we had the situation with this asset then being sold and recovering this capital receipt, it will remain of great interest to yourselves, members, moving forward as to how that capital receipt is performing. So I think it probably will receive full scrutiny at every stage, and council officers will have to advise fully as and when members need on that. Yes, I always like members to see the consultation document before we go out onto consultation, to check whether or not there's anything specific they want to put in. What we've done, it can be handled in a number of ways. There's always some key questions that are kept as open as possible. What do you think of the proposal? Do you have any concerns? Can you see any benefits? Is there anything else? But there might be some specific questions, so that you want to sort of target people's thinking a little bit, not towards a decision to sell or towards a decision not to sell, but in the event that it was sold, to try and maybe firm them up. If there's anything specific you want to cover, then it's always worth thinking about how those questions could be asked, but kept as open as possible, so that they're not closed questions, they're open questions. We're not dictating the direction of the consultation. And ultimately, the important thing that we try at every stage to get across in a consultation, and I have to say is one of the most consistently misunderstood parts of the process, is this is only the local authority's proposal. It's not the local authority saying we have decided that. It's a proposal, and any proposal can be subject to change depending on what's said within the course of the consultation. And some of our consultations, we have amended the proposal directly as a result of the type of representations we've received. But unfortunately, even though we go out on a consultation and we say it's the council's proposal, it's viewed as that must then be what is going to happen. And that's often where the misunderstanding comes. It's just us saying, look, we would quite like to do this. What do you think? But it's getting that across. It's how we get that across that's important. So yes, definitely any consultation document would be drafted and then can happily be discussed at ward business meeting, or can come forward for discussion at any stage, however members think is appropriate, before it gets launched. One of the other things as well that might be worth considering is, given the nature of the asset, we are required to consult for a minimum publicly of 8 weeks, but that's not a maximum time. So it's whether members think that they might wish to extend the consultation period beyond the 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks or something like that, to give people plenty of opportunity. But again, that's something that's subject to members' consideration.
Thanks very much. Again, Sarah. The only other hand I have up is Mark Rogers.
Thanks, Derek. I'll be brief here. I think from my perspective, a couple of the key questions came up about, should we recommend to sell? Because it's a good point. It's a proposal. It's not a decision taken. What do we do if we don't sell? Might be one of the other considerations. So just to put a point across to you, if we decide not to do anything at all, or the response back from consultation is negative, and I'll touch on that point in a minute, we haven't really lost anything. But the bottom line is, if we do nothing at all in relation to this, then we remain with an asset worth anything between £500,000 and a couple of £1 million locked away in the archives, which we have already acknowledged in the report, cannot ever actually be put on public display itself because of the value and the security issues around that. So actually we would be holding an asset which you wouldn't be able to realise and we wouldn't actually be able to show, and that seems like a slightly perverse situation. Admittedly not as mad as using it as a doorstop for 20 years or whatever it was, but nonetheless a little bit curious. I think in terms of the consultation, it's really, really tricky, and it's fascinating listening to Sarah sort of give life to the report there, because there are so many complexities, which when I first think back to my involvement with this bust, I was just thinking, well, it's worth £1 million as it was in those days, let's just get rid. And of course, as ever, it's way more complicated than that. So it was helpful to hear that discussion today. But in the same way that we're going out to consult on a proposal, we also have to have due regard to, but are not legally bound by necessarily, the responses that we get back from the public on that consultation. So I think the wider question here for me is, do we conceptually think it's worth putting the question and saying, look, this is what we're thinking, and there is a potential for the public of Invergordon to benefit from this. What do you think? I very definitely think there's absolutely merit in asking that question, although I expect that there will be, as Maxine says, a whole range of different responses, from the very positive to the absolute negative. But from my perspective, the question back to the negative naysayers is, well, what do you want us to do with this bus? Just lock it away for another 30 years and not do anything with it? You know, whereas on the other hand, properly invested within the boundaries of what is considered to be legal, actually a significant return can be seen by the people of Invergordon, can directly benefit people's lives potentially. I think the question then comes down to, what could you usefully use a capital receipt on? Depends how you define that, whether that means that you're allowed to invest in stocks and shares for return, or maybe you might not be. I think we need to look at that point. But certainly you do own an asset which needs capital investment in the proper sense of the word, using of capital, and that's your town hall, because it's fallen to pieces. So you need to consider also that the sale of this bust may help you actually defray some of your long-term liabilities in respect to the assets that you actually do own, rather than having to be reliant on a very small amount of revenue reserve that you have back at 85,000 quid sitting in the bank. So all these things are there in the round. I just think that the bottom line is, at the minute, if I was going to summarise it, we've got an asset that we're not doing anything with, that we can't do anything with, that's locked away in a cupboard, and actually could benefit the people of Invergordon significantly. And while I think it will be a difficult and challenging conversation, I don't think we should be afraid to at least put the question and see what comes back, and see if we can finally move this on. Thanks, Derek.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think we've had a good go at that. Councillors from Tayton and Easter Ross are very quiet, and that's probably sensible. That we're not chipping in a subject outside our immediate area. So I think well, there you go. That'll teach me. Maureen Ross.
Well, I think we should get something for it being a doorstop for 25 years.
I think that's maybe something for Mark to consider, whether the Invergordon Common Good Fund should be compensated for the use as a doorstop over that period. But if budgets are tight, maybe we'll leave that one today, and come back really to what we're being asked. The committee is asked to note the update on the work undertaken to explore the potential of selling the Bouchardon bust. 2, to consider the assessment of the various sale options, and note the advice from Sotheby's that a sale by private engagement may be the most beneficial in financial terms. And 3, in light of the information, consider whether to agree to commence a community empowerment consultation to inform the decision making in respect to the proposal to sell the Bouchardon bust. So, as I understand it, and I can be corrected if not, today we're really focused on 3. So we have advice on the possibility of a private sale, but we're not asked to decide on that today, but just to consider it. What we are asked to decide on today is to agree to commence a community empowerment consultation to inform the decision. So, members, do we agree to commence a community empowerment consultation?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Given the scale of the item, I think maybe all the members should state a preference one way or the other. So Pauline, you're on the top. You're on the top deck of my screen. Do you agree to that?
Absolutely. Public consultation we talk about here. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Public
Absolutely.
consultation.
100% agree. Yeah.
Okay, Maxine.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Okay, Molly.
Yes, please.
Tamala.
Yep.
Okay, Alistair.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
And I'd agree to that as well. So we've a unanimous agreement that we should commence a community consultation. So Sarah, we'll be back to you now to move that and Helen to move that process forward. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And
Good afternoon, members.
thanks for all the work you did to get us to this point. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Right, we're not. That's. I shouldn't say the excitement over. There are still items on the agenda. So next item on the agenda is the committee is asked to note the ward discretionary projects that have been approved since the 1st of April 2023. That's item 11. Helen, do you want to say anything in advance of that? Your mic is on the top of your head.
So sorry. Yeah, no, nothing to add because I think members will recognise all the ones within their wards. So.
Yeah. Okay. So members, can we note the approved project since the 1st of April? I'm fairly sure it's quite quiet, but I'm sure you'd agree.
Noted.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the final item on the agenda, as far as I'm aware, is the minutes of the previous meeting of the Easter Ross Area Committee held on the 7th of August 2023, which were approved by the full council on the 14th of September. So that's for noting. Can we agree that we've noted those?
Yep.
Okay. Helen, you have your hand up.
Because there is one more item, Councillor Loudon, item
Excellent.
13. If you don't mind, shall I just pick it up?
Yep, that's fine. Yep.
It's a very short report. The Cromarty Firth members will certainly recall that we put 20,000 aside for feasibility work for the Invergordon Social Club. They had quite a lot of support to do that piece of work. They did use somebody. The report they've received for consideration, but there is funds left, and so members here are asked to reallocate those funds and turn them into a community grant stream, which when we did that before with COVID funds went down very well in Cromarty Firth. And at that time we had a limit of 5,000. So I'm suggesting that the 12k remaining be repurposed as a community grant stream with a maximum of 5k.
Okay, members, are there any questions on that for Helen, or are we happy to agree?
Happy to agree.
To proceed in the way that she's requested. Okay,
Yep,
I think we're all happy to agree that. So at that point, I think we've reached Fiona. Are there any items that I missed at any stage to ask for approval for?
No, I think that's all done. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, I'd like to thank every member here and all the officers for all of their input during the course of today's meeting of the Easter Ross Area Committee, which I think was a marathon, but it was a marathon because there were lots of items of genuine interest which members and officers contributed to fully over the course of what's been an interesting day. So at the end of that, thanks to Helen and all the officers for the preparation of these reports, and I'll draw the meeting to a close.